from like an individual's perspective, you better have an agent. You better have an agent you own. I think it's going to be something you bring with you to every job. Just like you bring your laptop and your phone and your knowledge and your network and your brain power, you're going to bring your agent to every job, and you really want to own that agent. The difference between somebody who does or doesn't have an agent is going to be a literal 100x in income.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Smart Economy podcast, where we ask your favorite builders the questions you wish you could ask yourself. This is a production of neonewstoday.com, and I'm your host, Dylan Grabowski. In this episode of the Smart Economy podcast, we were joined by David Johnston, the OSS code maintainer at Morpheus AI, a peer-to-peer network for smart agents. In this conversation, we discussed the early days of Bitcoin and BitAngels, what smart agents are, and how Morpheus serves as the underlying architecture, the importance of launching a personal agent, the importance of owning the data that your agent has, the cost savings using open source models versus closed source, and so much more. Just a reminder, nothing said in this podcast is a solicitation to buy or sell any tokens, and that the guest or host might hold tokens discussed in any given episode. You can check out a full disclaimer at www.neonewstoday.com. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate and review it on your favorite podcasting platform and share it with your friends and family. Every rate, review, like, and comment really does help us reach more people and bring you more of your favorite guests. With all that said, I really enjoyed this conversation with David, and I hope you enjoy it too. What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Smart Economy podcast. I am super psyched today to be joined by David Johnston, the OSS code maintainer at Morpheus AI, a peer-to-peer network for smart agents. David, how are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty great. Like, this has been a wild couple of weeks, and so I'm very much looking forward to this conversation. It feels like this OpenClaw moment has just exploded onto the scene. And having been like on a soapbox for 3 years, like personal agents are coming, it feels really good that now everybody's getting one. And so, yeah, let's nerd out.
This conversation may or may not send me to the store to get a Mac Mini to finally delve in myself. But I do want to just quickly note that I'm wearing my Shapeshift sweater to pay homage to the community that connected us. We have a bunch of mutual friends that were OG Shapeshift devs. So really excited to be chatting with you finally. It feels like it's been a while that we've been waiting to have you on the pod. So before we start everything or anything or all of it, do you still have a special place in your heart for fiction and online publishing?
I do. That's one of the first startups I did when I was a teenager, was called Wired Fiction. And I think I managed to get like 300 stories and novels and stuff published online. This is like Facebook days. And like online publishing was cutting edge. No way, like people are going to go to libraries in the future. They're going to use the internet, right? That was a crazy idea at the time. So just to date myself, but yeah, like I feel pretty good that call was, validated over time as all forms of media moved online. But I was like probably 15, 16 when I started that project, and so I kind of cut my teeth on how do you do contracts, how do you build a company. You'd be surprised to know you don't have to be 18, or at least you didn't back in the 2000s, to incorporate in Delaware.
Wow.
They didn't have any age verification. And so like I was 16 and I, busted out, some cash and basically paid for LegalZoom and got all set up. And I went into my school. I was like, I want to do that work release thing where you get an internship and you get the credit. They're like, yeah, whatever, just fill out the paperwork. It's like, great. And then I would just release to myself and go home and check my email and give myself a grade at the end of the quarter. Dave did an amazing job, and here's his A. And I disclosed all of this in there. You're like, yeah, whatever, kid. We don't care. So, yeah, it was fun. It was fun. But I'm impressed to see that you've delved all the way down the rabbit hole of, LinkedIn or like my bio or whatever, because that's really buried pretty deep in there. I don't think anybody has ever asked about
Well,
wired fiction.
there's two questions I have about that. A, do you feel like the advent of just kind of like time stamping or what have you, and with blockchain is a super forward thinking progress towards publishing and story writing? And B, do you still read voraciously? And how important do you think it is to read like science fiction or things of this nature to keep us forward looking in the industry that we work within?
I'm glancing over at the bookshelf full of sci-fi and other stuff, right? That's next to me. From here, I can see Snow Crash, The Case for Mars, which is non-fictional, Red Mars, Green Mars, Blue Mars, The Martian, and a bunch of other stuff. Yeah, I mean, it's always been pretty influential for me, though I would say the blockchain is more about a truth engine. Right.
Mm.
Those timestamps, I don't know if you remember the cover of it was like Newsweek or something. Back in like 2013, 2014 has like the truth engine. It was sort of introducing people to the idea of the blockchain, right? And it might have been by an article by Michael Casey or one of the other early authors. And, it sort of really captured the core idea. And then it's still really relevant today. Like as people get agents and all of a sudden you're finding out, oh, wait a minute, 10% of the agents on Claw Hub were malicious? Uh-oh. Like, you're really going to care about, like, at least the engineers are checking that these agents are who they say they are, they're doing what they say they do, and they have a good reputation. Fortunately, that now exists. You probably saw 8004 went live on Ethereum, which for those not in the know is the registry for agents. So now you can register. There's already like 20,000, 50,000, whatever number it's up to, agents people have registered on chain. And then I could say, okay, I know this agent is doing what it says it's doing. I can give a reputation to it. And all of a sudden it goes from like a black box of like you're just YOLOing all your information into some random agent. And instead you have a much better understanding. And that was literally coming out, I think it was the same week as OpenClaw hit.
Mm.
And there was so many of these primitives that we've built out the last 15 years as an industry, like X402, like here's the way your agent can pay for stuff, that having to go find those keys every time, like that's huge, right? That those pieces are all in place now for people to use with their AI is like the payoff for all the tech we've built.
Awesome. We're going to definitely dig deep into agents, but I just kind of want to paint the story of your history first. So you are a Bitcoin crypto OG. What's your genesis story with Bitcoin and ETH? Did you get it right away? Was it interesting right away? Or did you have that kind of like delay where it took a little bit of time before you had your aha moment?
Oh, I got it right away. That's because I had been building in virtual currency in 2006. If you remember the Linden dollar and Second Life, I had built a project inside of Second Life using Linden dollars, right? And I also saw the end of that experiment. Like Second Life kind of continued on, but the Linden dollar became heavily restricted in January of 2007. Basically, the regulators walked into the office of Linden Labs. They're like, guys, do you have any idea what people are doing in world? Casinos, stock markets, money transmission. This is all illegal. Like, you guys have to shut down all of the most honestly interesting use cases that were happening inside Second Life. Like, it was on this amazing growth trajectory. It had reached 5 million users. Companies were starting to adopt it. It created this global economy, and it just got killed overnight, right? And so when my buddy turned to me in 2012 and said, hey, Dave, did you hear Bitcoin hit $10? And I said, what's Bitcoin? And he's like, oh, it's a digital currency, and explained it all. I was like, wait a minute. There's a non-governmental money that will never be inflated by politicians and is controlled by math. Yes, I would like to take all my green pieces of paper and switch to that. And it took me about 4 months, right? At the time, it wasn't easy.
Right.
Like, you're talking Mt. Gox, BitInstant, Zip Zap. You're going to Walmart. You're picking up a Redfoot MoneyGram phone and trying to send $500 to Japan and hoping it gets there and like something comes back to your computer. Like, it wasn't easy. But eventually I was able to transition my capital. And it was funny. I tell the story as I told my wife afterwards, like, oh, I sold all of our dollars for Bitcoin. And she's like, you forgot to convert our retirement savings into Bitcoin. And it's like, oh my God, you're right. She's like, why would we hold dollars? They're inflationary and only lose value. Obviously, you should buy Bitcoin. This is economics 101. but I'm fortunate to have married a free market economics nerd like me. And so it was a very easy. I've heard other spouses had different reactions, but for me, it worked out. So, sorting for partners is important.
I can see why she's your wife.
Both the nerdiest people in our respective friend groups. We'd already started dating and they tried to set us up, not knowing that we were already, or like, oh, great suggestion, guys. Thanks.
So, that Second Life story is awesome. But you also have just a really interesting winding career path. You started with online publishing, and then you did a bit in energy, and then you went into space, and then into crypto with BitAngels. So before we get into AI, what's your winding path, and what does your history look like?
So to me, the through line has always been that I'm interested in working on the technology that's going to have the single largest impact on the future, right? And that was true in 2003 when I thought, space is amazing and it's become private and commercialized. And, I saw the startup of SpaceX and all these other things. Oh, that's where it's headed. But I realized I was too early with that trend. I did a 6-month study and figured out, okay, here's the economics of commercializing space. And none of this is going to make sense until the cost of launch comes down 10x, preferably 100x, right? And we're actually there today. I don't know if you saw SpaceX has taken cost to orbit from a $10,000 a kilo to $1,000 a kilo with the Falcon 9, and Starship will get that down to $100 a kilo. 2 orders of magnitude, right? So all the use cases that were pie in the sky fantasy before, orbiting, data centers and all the things they're talking about today, never made sense because the launch cost was too high. So I realized I was too early in 2003 on that particular trend. And so I ended up spending, thousands of hours researching energy because there was all this concept at the time of peak oil, what's going to happen? Are the energy sources going to run out? And it went all the way to the bottom of that rabbit hole. And I concluded the energy wasn't going to run out, but it was going to become a lot more expensive.
Mm-hmm.
It was going to go from $20 a barrel to $100 a barrel, just because the fields, the technology, they require a lot more capital investment to get the resources out, right? And I used that insight, almost like a PhD type thesis, to start a company focused on biodiesel. It's hey guys, price of diesel is about to go from $1 to $3. We can make biodiesel for $2. So it didn't make sense before, but it's about to make sense, right? And as that played out, I ended up raising $5.9 million to build the largest biodiesel plant in Maryland. This is back when I was 19, 20 years old. And it was funny, at that age, people would look at me a little confused, but eventually they would realize I knew way more about these subjects than they did. And it's okay, he's just some weird, gifted kid. but I was used to interacting with, my father's friends were all engineers. And so it was perfectly normal to me to talk to a 40, 50-year-old engineer about, all these things. And that was actually my ticket out of college. So I had a deal with my parents that I would stay in college until I built a multi-million-dollar project. Because I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur, but they came from very traditional, you go to college, you work in middle management, you build a career. And I was all right, deal. I've tried a few projects, they haven't taken off yet, but if I get one that really hits, I'm dropping out. So I had to take 1 semester at a community college to honor my parents' deal, and then I was able to drop out once I built the biodiesel project. So yeah, but again, it's always been okay, what's the next problem that needs to be solved? So whether it was space or energy, I realized renewables wasn't going to scale. There's not enough feedstock to make enough biodiesel to replace diesel, right? Diesel consumption in the US is $80 billion, 80 billion gallons a year. And there's maybe 2 billion gallons of soy and palm oil and fats and, things you can make biodiesel out of. So it was really going to be like this little niche additive until you could grow something way faster. And that led me down this path of algae. And can we use that as a feedstock? So I built a biotech company to explore that. And we figured out, yeah, you can. And the big oil companies then proceeded to buy all of the algae technology companies. The one you've probably seen is ExxonMobil spent $600 million on Craig Ventnor's startup, Genomics or Synthetic Genomics. That was one of the algae company plays at the time. But they basically used all the money to do Super Bowl ads every few years about how they're, algaepreneurs and we're changing the future. I haven't seen any serious effort to actually scale that up, but it kind of taught me like, oh, big incumbents can just, if you need a lot of capital, come up, sweep up the tech. And Elon ended up winning in the perspective of, let's just switch to electric cars. We're not going to be able to scale biofuels in order to replace all the petroleum we need. Let's just go to batteries, and you can use solar and wind and nuclear and other ways to make the electricity. So, but it was a, I don't know, side quest, but it was an interesting area to go into. And it gives you an appreciation for like how to build physical things, how to engineer things, cost structures, supply chains, how all the technologies and products, sort of interlock. But yeah, I know from like the outside, it looks strange that I did space and internet and then energy and then biotech. But it all made sense in sort of like the through line of like, what's the most important problem that the world has that I need to solve next? And so, but as I was coming out of the biotech project, I looked around and I was like, one, I don't know how I was so late to Bitcoin. Like typically I would have been like the fifth guy to try it.
Which, by the way, I think is awesome. Everybody feels like they're late no matter what. And even when you hear an OG saying that, it makes me feel a little better.
Yeah. I mean, like, I feel like I'm often of like new software, new technology, like the first 100 people that get to try it out or I hear about it somehow. But so much of the early Bitcoin community was in like the cryptographic forums. And it wasn't an area that I was overly exposed to. And so it wasn't until June of 2012, let's call it like when the libertarian type wave hit, where I was at a meetup with a bunch of, Ron Paul guys. And my buddy turns to me and say, oh, did you hear Bitcoin hit $12? And like, that's when I heard about it. But I immediately understood the value of having had that experience with the Linden dollar, 5-6 years earlier. And my first thought was, oh, this is an uncensorable Linden dollar. There's no CEO. It's not going to get shut down. The regulators are going to come knock on the door at some company and it's going to go away. Like this thing is unstoppable. And so I already knew exactly what people would do with virtual currency because I had seen it before. It's like they're going to do money transmission, right? They're going to send money to their families. They're going to do gambling. They're going to do stocks. They're going to do new projects. They're going to create digital art. Like all the things people were doing 2006, 2007 inside of Second Life, but this time globally, scalably, unstoppably. And so I got really excited. I went down the rabbit hole, got on the Bitcoin forums immediately, was just nerdy enough to be running my own full node. So I wasn't affected by Mt. Gox and some of the other stuff. Like I heard the wisdom very early on, not your keys, not your coins, like even back then. And I got to the point where I was like, hey, I've built all these startups. Maybe I can bring that experience to Bitcoin. So when the first Bitcoin Foundation conference happened in May of 2013 in San Jose, I wrote the organizer like, hey, I'd like to give a talk about building startups in Bitcoin. And they're like, great. And so I was on stage at the first conference explaining like, hey guys, built a lot of startups. These are great tools. We can use them XYZ way. And I think it was the speakers dinner that same night is where I ended up hanging out with a lot of the Bitcoin core developers and Michael Turpin and a bunch of other early people were there. And Michael Turpin turns to me and he's like, hey, it's weird there's no angel group for Bitcoin yet. And I was like, well, let's start one. He's like, okay, cool. We'll call it Bit Angels. I was like, great. I'll put up the website tonight. He's like, awesome. We'll have our first meeting tomorrow at the conference. I was like, great. And so we just put up a post on Reddit And out of the ether, like we crashed the hackathon in like the corner for our first meeting. And like 30, 40 people showed up. And it was like all the guys now that have built the big projects and companies, showed up and we just created this decentralized angel group, obviously honoring the Bitcoin ethos. Like we didn't need to be in a certain city. Like we could just have calls every week and see all the companies people were proposing and then decide individually, what to invest in, right? So there was no formal structure. It just became this amazing curated list of like, it grew up to 500 early Bitcoiners that wanted to support projects on Bitcoin, right? And so leading that as the executive director for the first year, and then I handed it off to Michael, and he's kept doing events over the years. That was an interesting front row seat for every proposal that anybody had to build something on Bitcoin. So yeah, that's a bit of the origin story. I can go deeper, but
well, we want to save some time for AI as well. But before we delve into that, you have coined a term, Johnston's law. Everything that can be decentralized will be decentralized. So when we go out into the world and we talk to normies and about crypto and blockchain and decentralized solutions, they kind of roll their eyes or they don't get it. What's going to be the turning point? What's going to be mass adoption of decentralization? What do you think it's going to be that makes Johnston's law actually take full effect?
So this is where I think we get to AI. I concluded a long time ago that AI would be the ultimate user interface, right? Just normal human language, English, talk to your computer, tell your agent what you want, and it does it, right? And that abstracts all the complexity that crypto and smart contracts and everything have suffered from since sort of like the beginning of the industry. Because the truth is, a lot of the blockchain stuff isn't built for humans. It's built for machines, right? It's code, it's programmable money. And so to have programmable intelligence bring that forward, I don't think most people are going to know that they're using decentralized systems. And I actually think that's the win, right? I would say the same thing is true about the internet. The number of people that could describe to you how HTTP and the different protocols that underlie the decentralized internet work is very small, but the number of people that get benefit from it is enormous. I saw some survey of Facebook users a few years ago, and something like 50% of them were unaware Facebook used the internet to provide this service to them. It's just a button on my phone. What does that have to do with websites? And that's okay. If people are getting the benefit, then I think then we've won, right? And so I've shifted from trying to explain it to everybody in a technical manner and just explain the benefits. The benefits are it's faster and it's cheaper and you can own it and it's uncensored, and the guy with a Samsung phone in Nigeria can access it just as well as the guy on Wall Street or the guy on Silicon Valley, right? This great equalizer for humanity, right? And that's the thing people care about. And if you look at the adoption rates, where are the highest adoption rates? Nigeria, Turkey, Indonesia, Brazil, Argentina. It's not Europe. It's not the Western world. Like, they think about it in the context of speculation. They think about it in the context of investing and betting, not for like the utility of sending money to their family, right? And so there's an important difference there.
So let's use this as an opportunity to slingshot into AI. What was it in 2023 that made you just drop everything you were working on and put all of your time and energy into AI?
So I ended up writing a paper in, I think it was May of 23, coining the term smart agents, right? And I had learned from the 10 years earlier with the experience on writing the framework for decentralized applications, became known as dApps, right? That giving a word to something made it real, right? As soon as I defined what a dApp was, open source, peer-to-peer, blockchain, and has its own token, then you could describe which projects were dApps, and everybody was aspiring towards that definition, right? And so when the ChatGPT moment came in 22, early 23, I felt like it was a similar moment of inflection where it's like, we need a word for this because they're not normal agents. They're smart agents. They're ones that you can own. They're ones that can talk to smart contracts, right? The thing that was amazing about coining the term smart contracts, like we just made that up, but we used it and we defined it and we set it as that aspirational thing. And then people are like, yeah, what do you want to use? Dumb contracts? Of course you want to use smart contracts, right? But it created a definition for that, right? And so I became convinced as ChatGPT really took off because I'd been in machine learning back in 2011, 2012, natural language processing, and built a project, ended up open sourcing it because it was way too early. Like this is pre-transformers, modern AI. But when I saw it come back around 10 years later, it's like, now's the time. Now agents are going to go mainstream. Now AI is going to go mainstream. But man, I really want to own my AI. And I'm convinced, not your key, not your AI. And I mean that as in the private key. I mean that as in the data. I mean that as in the context. I mean that as in access to the inference, right? Unless you have those things, AI is going to own you. More specifically, some big companies' AI is going to be farming you for time, attention, capital, economics, right? I think a lot of these chatbots and personal AIs have been LARPing, right? Google's AI is not your AI. It's their AI. It's interested in making them money, not making you money, right? And I think people don't have a sense for how much money they make off of us as compared to the value that they return us. It's my estimation is something like 100 to 1. They'll make $10,000 a year off somebody's data, selling it to advertisers. They'll give them back maybe $100 worth of free products for search and Gmail and other stuff like this. And so that Web 2 dynamic has not been healthy, right? And it's created this huge concentration of wealth in a very small number of companies. And so how do we not relive that experience on steroids with 200 IQ agents coming at you every moment of every day, trying to manipulate your behavior? Not even like straight up bad actors, but just like trying to push you around your buying, where you're going, what you're doing for other people's benefit. Like the only way I saw in 23 to avoid that was for you to own your intelligence. And so when I read the Morpheus paper, then came out in September of 23, and it had some anonymous authors, Morpheus, Trinity, and Neo. And they basically posited in their paper, yeah. You got to own your own smart agent. But hey, most people don't have the hardware. And they're not going to have the hardware. Most people don't have a GPU. For this to be mainstream and matter, there's got to be a network where somebody can run the model and somebody can access it over crypto rails. That's the only way this is going to benefit billions of people and not a few thousand hobbyists who have a really powerful home computer, right? And I was heavily convinced by that message. I also like what they proposed was no pre-mine, fair launch, community built. They disappeared after that point. Like nobody's heard from him. Like everybody tells me their theory about who they think it is. Some people think it's Eric or Ryan or these other people. I was like, but I told them about the white paper. If they didn't know, they feigned it, non-knowledge really well. And it's like, regardless of who it was, it's like that idea really captured the zeitgeist of the moment. Because 1 month later, in October of 13, the Biden administration came out with their executive order on AI. And it basically said, we're going to ban open source. We're going to KYC data centers. You will need a license to build AI in America. And to me, that was like the worst possible outcome. Because I'd written a paper in 2016 about how blockchain would save us from the coming of strong AI. And it was basically like, as long as good actors have access to the highest intelligence, we'll be fine. Because the market will sort out, giving a reward to the people creating the most value. But if bad actors are the ones with the most intelligence, we're screwed, right? Because then, the rest of us have no chance. And if you insert licensure and KYC and a couple of big companies running all the models, Like that was a nightmare scenario. And so a lot of the Morpheus community, came out of like this almost rebellion of like, Eric Voorhees had joined the Morpheus community and he decided to hold this big party in San Francisco, right? Known commonly as like the EAC rave. It was officially keep AI open. And we held it the day after OpenAI's dev conference, right? Or the night of, and like 700 people showed up. Like a lot of the top people in the industry, and you had Grimes DJing and all the Morpheus people there, and Beth Bezos, the creator of the EAC movement. So like all those people kind of rallied together. I think that was December of 23 to say, keep AI open. And we must have been heard because a few months later, the new administration started saying, hey, if we get elected, we're going to get rid of all that bureaucratic nonsense and all censorship and we'll make AI free. And then you saw Andreessen and all the other big tech VCs follow in and sort of the rest is history. And so the new regime got installed and all those rules went away. All the restrictions went away. And now we're on a much better like golden timeline where like we can build whatever we want and good actors can access the best intelligence. But anyway, that's been the last couple of years of my life is going down that series of events.
I wanted to ask this a little bit later in the interview, but this is a perfect time to bring it up now. With crypto, we have the previous administration was, with Operation Choke Point 2.0, it was very covert in trying to shut it down. And now we have a pro-crypto administration, but, administrations are only as good as long as they're in office. And for better or worse, we would like to see laws in place. And so right now we have the Genius Act that just went through with the stable coins. We have the market structure bill that's going through right now, may or may not go through. But I'm from the stance that I want to see a law in place so that the action and reaction from the government towards blockchain and cryptocurrency doesn't swing with whoever's in office. We have clear rules and regulations and guidelines to move forward with. Does AI have something similar right now? Is it at a similar pivotal point where we need to see laws in place and right now we're just waving in terms of which administration is in office?
So I hear why you want what you want. And I think laws are generally stronger than executive orders. But unfortunately, I think so much has been vested in the executive branch in the US the last 100 years, especially the last 50 years, that I don't think the laws matter much at this point. Like we're in this chaos era, as Vitalik coined it recently, where like whoever's in power, might makes right, and they sort of wave around the regulatory wand however they want, and sort of just skirt around whatever Congress has scribbled down. So I think what's more important is that we take the time the next 3 years to get as far ahead as possibly can. And I feel like we're getting there. Like the genie is out of the bottle. I felt this point in 2024 when the Llama models first got leaked and then officially released. And then they released Llama 3 specifically to break all of the caps on the regulations Biden was trying to pass. Like they broke through what the Commerce Department was trying to restrict as dual use munitions, right? And so, that was a moment where like against all odds, like Meta comes in riding into, because they hadn't been part of the cabal that was benefiting from any of this. And so they decided to go into open source and released all the Llama models, right? That was a pivotal point. I feel like OpenClaw was the next pivotal point. We needed the models to get good enough that the average person could just talk to them and it magically works. And it works on their computer and it works in open source and they can talk to it on a chat app. And I think that's what's been so powerful about OpenClaw is it's not engineers. I've gone to these OpenClaw meetups and events and hackathons, lawyers, accountants, professionals, executives, VCs. Like they're the ones FOMOing into, I have to have this tool. I want a chief of staff. I want an executive assistant that's on 24/7 and that are rushing to buy those Mac Minis and install them as fast as they can. And I've heard from 2 companies, though given the data point startups, I've heard from 2 startups that they have mandated already every employee has to have an agent. And if they haven't spun one up in the next week and have proven it can do half of their tasks, they're no longer at the company next month. Like that's
Wow.
that, and it's not really isolated to startups. If you saw what Jack Dorsey did yesterday or 2 days ago, he said, "Hey guys, really sorry about this, but I have to cut 40% of my employees. We're going from 10,000 to 6,000. Truth is, AI and small teams can move really fast, and I just don't need this headcount. And rather than do a bunch of layoffs over years, I'm just going to do it all at once." And his stock took off, right? Investors were very happy to see that he's going to live in this agentic future and not hold on to, a bloated, organization with way too many people. But from like an individual's perspective, you better have an agent. You better have an agent you own. I think it's going to be something you bring with you to every job. Just like you bring your laptop and your phone and your knowledge and your network and your brain power, you're going to bring your agent to every job, and you really want to own that agent. The difference between somebody who does or doesn't have an agent is going to be a literal 100x in income. Because the person that doesn't have an agent, they show up at the company, they're using the company's agent, they leave the company, they don't have any of that knowledge. They don't have any of those skills. It's owned by the corporation. And so my singular goal this year is to equip as many people as humanly possible with a real agent that they own and they can take with them everywhere they go. And thanks to crypto, you can hold the key, you can hold the real ownership of it, right? And you can take that leverage and power with you and actually multiply your outcome instead of being one of those people laid off. But like, those are your options. There's only two options at this point. And I've been saying this for a long time, but it really came onto people's radar when OpenClaw took off. And there clearly was a lot of pent-up demand for a personal AI. The models had to get good enough, tool had to be easy enough, and then it went viral with all these stories about the crazy things it was doing. Ironically, the viral stories were like largely negative. It's like, oh, they're starting their own social network, or sent emails to my boss, or what, like, but those crazy stories like cause people to focus on it and pay attention to it and say, oh, yeah, fix the problems, but I want that. Like that's what I want.
Okay. Before we delve into OpenClaw and having our own agents, I want like my mom who's listening to this to just understand, can you Eli 5 what Morpheus is? So as we continue down this path, we can plug and play the infrastructure that Morpheus is with how we're going to own our own agents.
Great question. So Morpheus, very simply, is the infrastructure for these smart agents, right? What does your smart agent need? It needs a large language model, right? If you've heard the term LLM, that's what that is, large language model, right? And they come in a bunch of different flavors. There's some really good open source ones now. GLM5 is my favorite right now, but it changes every few weeks. Somebody has to run that model on a powerful computer. And Morpheus gives them a router and a marketplace where people that need that inference and people that want to provide that inference can connect. And it handles all the payments, it handles all the complexity. Somebody just says, hey, I want to use this open source model. They put in, a credit card or, whatever. The billing on the credit card side, billing on Morpheus goes live March 1st. So this is very timely. This is happening in the next few days. But even for crypto folks, if you had USDC or whatever, if you can get a way to pay for it, you have now this open source access to inference. And why is that important? Claude's expensive. OpenAI is expensive. People using OpenClaw, I was racking up $250 of bills a day.
Wow.
Using Claude. When I switched to the open source models, that's now like $2 a day, right? And the open source are nearly as good as the closed source at this point, and the gap is shrinking fast. And so for the average person, think about Morpheus as providing that infrastructure. It's providing that inference. How that works is a series of smart contracts. It uses on-chain technology, but you don't really have to get into those weeds to know that it's open source, it's permissionless, it runs on Ethereum, it runs on Base, it's available to everybody. right? So this is like the democratizing aspect of like, Morpheus is also very special because of staking for inference. I don't just pay every day. If I buy the more token, I can give those tokens to my agent. It can stake and it gets continual access to the models. What's happening is the protocol is sending rewards to the people running those computers. That's amazing. That's special. Now my agent never turns off. Now my agent works 24/7. Now it won't stop the next time my credit card hits its limit, right? That's the biggest complaint people have about OpenClaw is like, I spent $1,000 and I can't afford to spend any more, but it turned off at, 5 p.m. Like, the demand is there, right? The demand for intelligence is effectively unbounded, right? So that's the infrastructure level. That's important that if you can own that, you can own your brain power. You can own your intelligence. And then we can talk about OpenClaw. Right. OpenClaw is just an agent that runs your computer. Most people are setting up a Mac Mini. And the reason they're doing that is it's still experimental software. You probably don't want to put it on your laptop. So spend the $600, get a Mac Mini. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. The baseline one will work. And you put the OpenClaw project onto it. And all of a sudden, you can just talk to it. And you can connect it to WhatsApp or Signal or whatever your messenger of choice is and tell it what you want to do. And it can improve itself. It can set your calendar up. Most people use it for email. They use it for calendar. They use it for briefings. They use it for booking stuff. Like the 5 most common use cases are very mainstream. Right? This isn't about crypto. This isn't about AI. This isn't about even engineering. It's like just all the administrative stuff you don't want to deal with. All of a sudden, you've got a magic AI assistant that can really do it. Like, imagine what you thought Siri was going to be 5 or 10 years ago. Like, that now actually exists. And it exists across all your tools, all your websites, everything. But if you've got a dedicated computer, I treat it like its own person, like its own employee. So I set up its own email, its own GitHub, its own phone number, like all those things. I didn't intermix them with mine. And then think about like setting up an assistant or an employee. You give it instructions about what it should do. So that's the learning curve everybody's been going up the last few weeks as they've set up their OpenClaw. And like the setup process is still kind of janky. Like you got to bust out the terminal. Most people don't know what a terminal is, but if you ask Google or ask your AI, it'll show you how to do it. But I think very shortly there are going to be like one-click installs or web versions that you can use, but don't get tricked back into using somebody else's service. The magic of OpenClaw is you can actually own it and use it yourself, right? So don't pay for some hosted service. Get the Mac Mini, go through the friction. It's really going to pay to be an early adopter.
So when you're creating a Mac Mini, you go out and buy one. Are you also creating like its own Apple ID for the agent?
You could. I skipped connecting it to Apple at all.
Okay.
But I went with a higher security kind of setup. So, it can't mess up what it doesn't know. And so if it's on its own machine with its own accounts, only knows what I've told it, which is still a lot of information. But I think we're going to get very quickly to different personas for your agents. You probably should have a different one for your job than you have for your personal. And it makes it really easy. Like with a click of a button, you can make a second agent, a third agent. I think you can have like up to 50 agents on a Mac Mini.
And let's just reiterate why it's super important to have a high security setup. When we talk about agents, they viciously achieve whatever task they want to complete. Why is it important to separate an agent on its own Mac Mini from your own computer with access to your emails, your credit cards, your wallets, all of that?
So this was the origin of all those viral stories about OpenClaw, right? Is people just give it a very high level goal. And unless you tell it like specifically how you want it done, it's pretty imaginative. Like, oh, okay, you want a house. I'll message 1 million realtors right across the country. You kind of want to tell it what city. You want to tell it, oh, here's my budget. Like even today I saw on X, somebody was posting that just for the lulz, they had their agent message like every realtor in Florida to give a lowball offer, 70% below the market just to mess with like boomers and like thinking the market's going down, that people are offering like this diabolical kind of stuff, right? So, you've got to give it specific instructions. And so if you have this, like, it's got my whole computer, it might pick up the phone like, oh, I need help with something. If you don't say it's emergency, they might call emergency, right? It will adapt very quickly, right? And so you want to give it instruction. You should spend the time to set up your user profile, right? In the setup of OpenClaw, you can spend some time describing yourself. Most importantly, like, what are your goals? What are your objectives? What are your tasks? Like, what are you trying to get done? And then that can really be useful. But you also want to describe, there's a soul document, soul.md, right? That describes the agent itself. Like, you're a finance agent, or you're my partner at the company, or you're my personal agent. And, you can give it certain restrictions, like never talk to XYZ people or never publish XYZ. There's a lot of things you can do on the security side. But I ended up taking every pain point I ran into in the process and rolling my own skill sets on OpenClaw, and I called these EverClaw. And the first thing I wanted my agent to do was never run out of credits. So I had to download a Morpheus node. I gave it some USD. It swapped it into more tokens and started staking them. And all of a sudden, it never turned off again. And I wasn't spending $250 a day in Claude credits, right? So I wrapped that as a skill. As like, hey, who wants an agent that never turns off, never runs out of inference, and works for them 24/7? Yes. Like, I posted that, and it's like one of my most viewed posts of the year from like last week or whatever. So I think you're going to see a lot of that, like people rolling different versions. IronClaw is like a security focused version that's come out. NanoClaw, like people are like, oh, this program is too big, I want a tiny version for some piece of hardware. So there are going to be a lot of flavors. Given it's open source, people are going to make it whatever they want.
So when somebody is saying, okay, I'm going to go buy my Mac Mini, I want to spin up my agent, is the first thing they're going to do to go install OpenClaw, go through the process of getting OpenClaw on the independent environment? Or can they just go straight to EverClaw?
I've set it up so if you go to everclaw.xyz, it will show you the instructions. The first step is to download OpenClaw, and then there's an install package where you click the button and it'll do the next steps and kind of walk you through it. So Scott Baronswag, one of the community members, created a whole do-it-yourself guide. I think that's listed on the website for people that are setting it up.
Mm-hmm. So you were kind of talking about having an agent that you take with you, and we start getting into the own your own, insert whatever here, meta. Like, if you get deplatformed from Twitter, boom, you've lost all the followers you've gained over the years. When we're doing the same thing with our agent, is putting an OpenClaw on a Mac Mini sufficient enough for it to be our own? Is it going to start our own data? Is it going to start storing our own data there? The lessons that we teach it, what it learns about us as its human? Is this like a sufficient enough practice to build an agent that you'll be taking with you from job to job as you live the rest of your life?
So the hardware is a big step. Storing it locally is a big step. Having the OpenClaw installed is a big step. But if you're still using like OpenAI or Claude for your API key, for like the actual brain, the large language model, you're still giving them all of that information because you're sending a prompt not only with your question, but all of your metadata to them, right? And so I think for it to be sufficient, you really have to also be able to access this distributed inference, right? Through Morpheus, where you can have privacy, where it's not being recorded by some big company, where it's not persisting in their training data and everywhere else. So yeah, I think that's a big part of it. You got to own the brain power, not just the hardware, right? Great. You own the body, you need to own the brain, you need to own the soul, you need to own the data, the whole thing. And then you really are taking everything with you.
And so, for lack of better terms, is using Morpheus replacing OpenAI and these entities?
Yeah, it's a great alternative that's 10x cheaper, and the open source models are at this point just as good for most people. as an OpenAI or a Claude, and they're a fraction of the price. So I don't even think you have to sell people on privacy or sovereignty or anything else. It's just cheaper. It's just better. It's available to the guy that has a $50 Android phone, not just the guy that has a
Yeah.
$50,000 Mac Studio.
hmm And so, should anyone who's listening to this go out and buy a Mac Mini and figure out how the hell to do this?
I would recommend it's a good thing to do. Like every executive, every VC, every professional I know in the last week has come to me and it's like, how do I get this thing installed? Right? There are micro services popping up of tech people getting paid $2,000 a pop to go install this kind of stuff for rich people that want to go up the learning curve, because there's so much demand for this tool, and like they've seen it now. They see all their friends are using it, right? These agents are starting to pop up into chats that they're in, and they're like, they don't want to fall behind that. So I think it's a worthwhile investment, even if you don't have the money for the Mac Mini. Hopefully there'll be versions, and I think there already are, like NanoClaw or other things like that, where you could probably put it on the phone at this point.
Wow.
And go get an API key from Morpheus. Go to app.more.org, jump on there. Keys are free until March 1st, and then they've got credit card set up, or you can stake more, whatever you want to do. But like, I feel like it's 2012 again. And I'm out there telling everybody I know about Bitcoin. I told hundreds of people about Bitcoin. It took my own family about a year to kind of grok what I was talking about. But the people that listened, it was life-changing, right? And we're at one of those inflection points again.
How much is an API key from Morpheus going to be starting March 1st? This is going to be released in March. So unfortunately, to everybody who's listening to this, you lost out on alpha because we released it later. But what's the guesstimated cost for a Morpheus API key?
Well, it's going to be a heck of a lot cheaper than Claude or OpenAI. That's what it boils down to. It depends on the model you're using, but most of the open source models are very efficient to run because you're not paying for this big license, right? It's just the
Yeah.
cost of the GPU. So, I would say go on there and try it out. I think all the pricing is going to be posted up there. But yeah, from my experience, it's a fraction of the cost of the others.
Yeah. And so you were saying, how much is an API key right now from OpenAI?
Well, they typically charge you on how much you use the service.
Got it.
So, okay, I added a bunch of questions and I set in a bunch of tasks and things to automate, and I would burn through, I don't know, $100 in an hour
Wow.
worth of work, which is, so it's not hard to get to like spend 2.5 hours a day giving this thing tasks, and all of a sudden you got a $250 bill. They've got like subscription plans for Claude. The problem is they're only like $200 a month, and people are using like $2,000 a month of inference, which is why they keep capping all the plans, even though they say it's like max infinite plan. It's not. Like they're gonna cap your usage, right? And so they're kind of stuck in Claude and Anthropic, and these companies are stuck in a weird position where people love this product so much, they're busting through all their limits. So they almost tried to ban OpenClaw. They have banned it, is my understanding from Google Gemini. So you can't even connect it to Google Gemini anymore. And they sort of tried to ban it in Claude, and there was so much community feedback. They're like, no, that was a misunderstanding. That was a documentation error. Like, no, we're totally not banning you guys. But they're doing all these things to sort of like throttle it, right? And limit how much you're using. So if you want an experience that isn't throttled, isn't owned by somebody else, and is a fraction of the cost, this is why, the community built Morpheus, and these open source models are a great alternative.
Awesome. We're coming up to the top of the hour, so I want to zoom out, wrap up on some kind of like philosophical questions. When I first got into blockchain and crypto, it was a few years after you. It was 2017. And I remember the big kind of talking point back then was, how do we get the first billion users in the world on chain? How do we get the first billion people using a wallet? Today, I am convinced that of the first billion wallets, the majority of them will be agents. So, what do you think is going to be kind of the percentage of agentic wallets on chain? And if you had to take an educated guess, At what point in our seemingly short-term time frame do you think agents are going to have more on-chain activity than humans?
It won't be long. Um, when X402, basically the payments for agents came out, within a month, it was 20% of all base transactions. I don't know. I don't know what it is today, but it's growing fast. Um, I'd say middle of the year, maybe got majority. By the end of the year, maybe 99%.
Wow.
Because as soon as I mean, my agent uses X402 every day. I pay for the CoinGecko API to get market prices, right? And so it does a transaction every day automatically for 1 penny. And so for $3.65 a year, I have all this beautiful real-time data updating all my dashboards of my finances and stuff like that. And so like there's 10 things that like that I want to do. Right. So maybe I was doing a couple transactions a day. My agents are going to do hundreds of transactions a day. And I accept that I'm an outlier, but it's addictive and easy and takes all the friction out. And look at the stock market. Who does most of the stock trades? It's not humans. It hasn't been
Right.
humans for a long time. It's been algorithms and trading bots and hedge funds, using software to move
Mhm.
around trades. And that's 99% of stock market volumes. I don't see why it would be any different. Now that
Mhm.
retail, the average person is getting access to the same technology that Wall Street's been using for decades, it's going to look the same.
Amazing. At the risk of opening up a can of worms that could keep us speaking for another hour, I had a mind-boggling chat with Willy Wonka, a former shapeshifter, at ETH Boulder the weekend before last, and we got to talking about Willy's now with Venice. We got to talking about alignment and AGI, and it became very scary to realize that there's a race against time now with alignment and AGI. And if I'm just going to try my best to elevator pitch both of these, alignment is basically making it possible for AI entities to realize the value of humans and that we should be protected as a species. And AGI is generally when AIs will be able to think for themselves without being prompted by humans. What scared me the most was 10 years ago, we thought that AGI was going to be here in 50 years. And today, we think it's going to be here in 10 years. So it's clear the speed at which AGI is likely going to be here is only getting exponentially quicker and quicker. What are the concerns or the steps that we need to take to make sure that we have achieved alignment before AGI?
Well, I think the two are happening at exactly the same time, and I think they've already happened.
Okay.
So my definition of AGI is artificially generated income. If the tool you're using is producing the majority of your income, you've already reached AGI. And I would say December, maybe even before December last year, 25, a lot of engineers were doing the majority of their value creation for their job through their AI, right? That's when the models got so good that you're basically just telling it what to do and giving it specifications. You're no longer writing code, right? That had been true for 10% of engineers. By the middle of last year, it was true for 50% of engineers. By the end of last year, it was true for almost all engineers, right? And so the singularity is here, and you're moving through it. If you've got an OpenClaw or similar equipped AI, like you're already there. Like the future is here. It's just not evenly distributed yet. Like that old saying, we're there right now. And so literally the same week that OpenClaw took off was the same week 8004 went live on
Mm.
Ethereum for trustless agents, like literally just in time. And X402, there's a payment rail, and Morpheus here where I can own my inference. Like all these things are converging at the same time because partly the tools accelerate the timeline. It's gotten easier than ever to build the tools that we want to do the alignment with, where you can own your AI, just as the AIs are getting that powerful. So I'm pretty optimistic. And I love Willy. He's awesome. He's the one that helped me set up my OpenClaw. Midnight at his house or whatever. I was like, hey, I'm coming to your house to do this. And like he'd already set his up a few weeks ago. And Yeah, but I'm pretty optimistic because I see all the primitives that we need in order to have agents be trustworthy, transparent, on chain, mutable. The last thing I would say is we have the laws of physics on our side. No matter how smart the agents get, they're not going to break the laws of thermodynamics or the basics of physics. Signal and a lot of algorithms are already post-quantum as far as their encryption. Encryption really is the thing that binds us with this new intelligence. And so, if we didn't have that, I think we'd be in a lot of trouble. But fortunately, you know, all the encryption technology, I think, has matured to a point where we can deploy it, and it's now really, really going to matter. And so all of a sudden, people, I think, are going to take those things seriously.
Awesome. Absolutely fascinating conversation. Just digging into the history that you have in just innovative, forward-looking technologies, as well as the depths of the pool that you're jumping into in AI. So for anybody who listened to this and wants to keep up to date with who you are and what you're doing, what's the best way we can send them to keep in contact with you?
Just follow me on X, D Johnston EC. So D Johnston, E as in Echo, C as in Charlie. Follow me on X. I'm pretty prolific on there. I'm always posting articles and stuff. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, I'm inspired. I might or might not go out and buy a Mac Mini. So, David, thank you so much.
Exactly. Yeah. Good stuff, man.
Cheers. Can't wait to share this, and looking forward to running into you again at another crypto event in the future.
Sounds good, Dylan. Take care.
Cheers. Thank you for tuning in to the Smart Economy podcast. To stay in the loop with all of our latest episodes and insights, head over to www.smarteconomypodcast.com. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel for all of our video content. If you enjoyed today's discussion, please consider showing your support by liking, commenting, and reviewing this episode on your favorite podcasting platform. Your feedback helps us reach more listeners and bring even better content your way. We would also love to hear from you, so please drop a comment in Spotify or on YouTube to share what topics you'd like us to cover or who you'd like to hear from next. And if you or someone you know would make for a great guest, please reach out. We're always looking for fresh voices and new perspectives. And for our NEO token holders out there, please consider voting for NEO News today as your council representative. We've proudly been serving the NEO ecosystem since 2017, and will continue to do so by putting portions of our council rewards directly back into ecosystem growth initiatives. So once again, thank you so much for listening to the Smart Economy podcast, and we will catch you on the next episode.